This is a true story. The events talked about in this episode of Script or Screen were shown on television in 2014. At the request of our timestamp, the events have been condensed to a reasonable amount. Out of respect for the audience, the rest has been told exactly as it occurred.
Why, hello, boys and girls. Greetings and salutations. My name is Christopher Kitchen. I am the host of Script or Screen. I'm here, as always, joined by my co-host, Zach Strackman. Zach, how you doing?
Oofta, I'm having a day, let me tell you.
Oh, boy, that's wonderful. Welcome. I hope you enjoyed those wonderful accents. If you couldn't tell by the title, today's episode is about Season 1 of Fargo.
The FX critically acclaimed series.
Wonderful. And I'm actually super excited about this episode, Zach. We're actually celebrating. This last week was our inaugural week of posting, and this is the first episode we've recorded since then. Super excited. We had a really great kind of, I guess they beat my expectations. Our first episode had about 80 listens on the audio platforms, so that's Apple, Spotify, Anchor. I think I said that one, I don't know. Just all the platforms, and then on YouTube, it had about 30-something, so really great. The other two episodes are up. They're about, I think, 50 listens, both of them, across all platforms. So if you haven't already, you can listen to the first 3 episodes right now. And we also have a little bit of a technical upgrade this week, Zach. You've upgraded your setup, your system, and to be honest, I'm quite jealous.
Thank you. I've come into the 21st century, but yeah, I think it's one more of our steps into making this podcast the best it can be.
Yeah, we want to deliver a fantastic product to our newly found listeners and audience members. So
we do that because we appreciate your ears.
We do. So if you haven't already, now that this podcast is updated and quite all right, share with your friends, your family, anybody who you think would be interested.
Even your enemies.
Even always your enemies.
Even strange men you meet at the hospital who offer you really bad advice.
I would take that with like a grain of salt, even. I don't know if I would necessarily want to get into all of that. But let's do it. Let's in fact get into all of that right this moment. Fargo, Season 1. We're celebrating Fargo as its return to the small screen. What is it, September 28th? Of this month, that's Sunday?
27th for on television, 28th for streaming, and I believe this episode should be coming out the Friday after the first episode has premiered. So yeah. I'm gonna predict the future and say it was great. I loved it.
That would be pretty nice to know. I'm actually super excited because we got Chris Rock. We get, who's the gentleman that's in all the Wes Anderson films?
Jason Schwartzman.
Yeah, Jason Schwartzman. I'm like, this cast looks awesome. I remember, I can't remember how long ago we got the announcement of Season 4. It's taking place in like the 60s in Kansas City.
I think it's actually the 50s.
The 50s. Oh, okay, that's what it is. It's just a really great kind of setting. Fargo already took its turn to the past versus its modern day setting. In Season 2, and I think it was 79, 80.
Yeah.
With that stars Patrick Wilson. They kind of take a dive into the old side of policing back in the day. So,
yeah, it's a great series. Obviously based off the Academy Award-winning film by the Coen Brothers, which we won't get into today, but promise it will have its day in the sun. We're gonna probably dedicate a whole episode to it down the line. Won Best Picture. Frances McDormand won Best Actress for it.
It was a great movie. And overall, when we start getting to our Coen Brothers series, it'll definitely leave its mark on our show, for sure.
Oh, for sure.
But I feel like I want to start off maybe. Obviously spoilers to anybody that hasn't seen the show, but let's give like a little bit of a synopsis on what Fargo is, right?
Well, on that, I want to say, contrary to what the show would tell you, what the movie would tell you, and what we kind of lampooned with the opening of this episode, it is not actually based on a true story.
Eat gad. How dare you? Why do you say this to me?
I say this because the Coens said this. It was this idea that Joel and Ethan Coen had when they were writing the movie. I believe the movie may have some analog in the real world, but largely it was a fictional story, and they chose to say it was a true story because they felt that lended itself to a more believability, I guess, is the best way to explain it.
I think I find it more unbelievable that all this stuff is real, or that I would think that all these things and events are real versus them not being real. I don't know. I don't know if I could believe this is happening in real life, but I'm very glad that it didn't.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a really fun approach to the idea of a fake real crime story. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like so many shows and movies these days are based on actual events. And this is kind of a fun little spin on that. And this show has a very interesting identity. I feel like different than a lot of shows on television because it exists both as an anthology series with each season taking a new story, but it is all connected in the same universe.
So that's actually interesting. I'm actually not sure if I was aware of this. Did they plan on making an anthology like from the beginning, or did they decide after the success of season 1 that they were going to make it an anthology, started season 2?
I think they always intended it to be an anthology series. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much they knew it was going to be all connected.
Yeah.
But they definitely, I mean, you can tell when you watch the first season, it is a self-contained story. It ties up nicely at the end.
Yeah, I really feel like that way of storytelling, that format, really just kind of lends itself to stories like these. And it's really good that Noah Hawley, the creator, and also the fellow writers and the producers of the show, kind of looked at it like they didn't want to tarnish what the last season had done. If anything, they can subtly add on to it with the details in the other seasons. But, yeah. I mean, that's why I feel like every season has been so successful, is because they've been able to kind of implement a lot of new ideas while keeping the kind of core values of what Fargo is the same. Mm-hmm. And it's that they kind of, that linking together, right, of the seasons. It's I feel like the most rewarding thing about the show, or maybe one of the more rewarding things.
It's pretty fun, when you go, well, someone in season 2 drops a line, you go, oh, that's, that'll come back, that happened back in season 1, or mm-hmm. a character pops up in season 3, and you're like, oh my god, it's that guy.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of almost like how Tarantino connects his movies.
Oh, well, it's interesting is that Tarantino, the way that he connects them, while also using most of the same actors in most of his films, mm-hmm. I feel like another show that kind of does that on the FX network is American Horror Story. How I think they
but I don't know if those are all connected.
I feel like there's some form of connection. I'm actually not a viewer
of the show.
Yeah, I haven't seen it much, but I know that it has like a good following and people are always excited.
They use kind of like a repertoire of actors, of the same actors, Evan Peters, Sarah Paulson, all of them. But
I know with Tarantino, it's a little more evident that like characters are related. Like I think between the Hateful Eight and what is it, Inglourious Bastards, you have the Hickox, right? Sergeant Lieutenant Hickox, and then you have Pete Hickox from Hateful Eight, who's the bounty hunter,
right? Which
he's the
I
wanted
think
man.
That's where it comes in a little more similar to Fargo, where you have
or the Vega brothers.
Season 1, you have the Solversons. You even have Lou, and then in season 2, you focus on Lou.
In his younger days.
Season 3, there's not so much of a connection, but there are a few characters who pop up.
Yeah,
and now I'm interested for when we get to season 4. Where we can start making those connections and seeing things that line up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this all this to mean that Noah Hawley really, he steered the ship so well. I think in terms of many filmmakers who have tried to replicate the Coen Brothers style, I don't know anyone else who has come as close as Noah Hawley.
Yeah, I guess it also helps that he's writing Fargo series, which he has to. I believe the Coen Brothers are producers on the Fargo series as well.
It's possible. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's a wonderful series. He also was the showrunner and head creative for Legion, also on FX. Which, if you haven't watched it, totally worth a watch. It is an awesome show.
Legion is based in the X-Men universe, correct?
Yes, it is.
That's interesting. I actually haven't watched Legion before.
Oh my god, you gotta. But and on top of the writing, the cast in this series is phenomenal.
How do you feel about? Well, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Martin Freeman and as well as Colin Hanks. You could say I'm a bit of a fan of Billy Bob Thornton, but I wasn't. I don't think I could quote everything and look at everything he's done in the past. But this was my introduction to Allison Tolman, who just did a fantastic job. And I mean, the other actors too, like Billy Bob, fantastic. I think he won an Emmy for this role, an Emmy or a Golden Globe. Yeah, that's what it was.
Golden Globe, yeah.
Okay. And actually, funny enough, I think in his Golden Globe speech, and I could be corrected here, he thanked a PA in his speech, and I was like, as someone who's worked as a PA before, that means a lot.
Yeah, it's awesome to give that kind of recognition.
Exactly.
But yeah, Allison Tolman, she really steals the show, which is crazy to say for the maybe one of the leads of the series, but especially when you have such out and out wonderful performances from Martin Freeman, from Billy Bob Thornton. Everyone here brought their A game, and it just makes the show such a delight to watch.
I would say so. I guess before we move forward, I want to do the brief synopsis. A disclaimer again, we are going to full spoilers with everything happening. So with that being said, Season 1, Fargo, released in 2014. In 2006, Lorne Malvo, played by Billy Bob Thornton, passes through Bemidji, Minnesota, and influences the community, including put-upon insurance salesman Lester Nygaard, played by Martin Freeman, with his malice, violence, and deception. Meanwhile, Deputy Molly Solverson, played by Allison Tolman, and Duluth police officer Gus Grimley, played by Colin Hanks, team up to solve the series of murders they believe may be linked to Malvo and Nygaard.
And the way you watch this whole thing unfold is it's one of those shows you just don't want to put down.
I'd agree. It took me a while to get into Fargo in the first place, though. I feel like maybe I watched the first episode 2 times, but maybe I don't know what place of mind I was in when I started watching. But
let me ask you,
when I fully committed,
had you watched the series or the movie before the series?
I actually watched the movie after the series.
Oh, yeah. See, I came in as a fan of the film, and it's kind of it hits the nail on the head.
Yeah.
I feel like this season, more than any other season after, borrows the most from the movie in terms of themes, in terms of plot elements and characters. Okay. And I think it does a good job of kind of shifting things around in a way where up until a very specific point later, in the first handful of episodes, you would be understandably it would make sense if you thought, oh well, they're just, it's a reimagining of the movie, they're retelling the events, but with slight changes here and there, which again, that changes when we get to a certain point. But I think
I feel like also though, as like a standalone show, even like I said, I hadn't watched the movie before I watched the season. I still thought through and through it would have been good on its own.
Absolutely.
And I feel like because of that fact that it's good standalone, it's just kind of it adds another level to it, right?
No, absolutely. I agree that it doesn't use the movie as a crutch.
Yeah. But it uses the movie in all the right places.
Yeah.
You could say.
I mean, it's great, and I think with that, I don't know if you want to get into kind of if we want to start kind of cruising through the what happens in the show and the themes that come up. And
yeah, I feel like, well, the story itself, right? It's just you brought up this really good point to me when we talked about all the titles for all the episodes, right? I feel like this would be a good thing to bring up on.
Yeah.
It's just every title for each episode is a parable or something.
It's a parable or a riddle or a Zen koan.
So they go as the Crocodile's Dilemma. The next one is the Rooster Prince, following with A Muddy Road, Eating the Blame, The Six Ungraspables, which I feel like is probably the best one in terms of parables.
Yeah.
What is this one? Bearden's ass. Fun. Going into Who Shaves the Barber, following with The Heap, and then A Fox, a Rabbit, and a Cabbage. This one I was probably the most familiar with. And then the last one was Morton's Fork. Now, this I found kind of like a great parallel, because the show itself is just one big parable. You know, it's the culmination of all of these things, all the events, and especially with all the characters, right? Like, what did you say that Lester's big issue was, like, damned if he do, damned if he don't, because he has all these choices that it really just brings him kind of in the worst of situations.
Yeah, it's he's definitely the Crocodile's Dilemma and Morton's Fork, the first and final episode titles, reference parables that deal with the idea of being damned if you do and damned if you don't, and that is Lester to a T, at least at the beginning and end of the series where he finds himself. I think it's really interesting stuff when you dive into these parables and these koans that each of these titles is based off of. It sheds a new light onto what you're watching, and it's fun to kind of pick through and say, okay, well, if this person represents this, then how does this connect to that? It's really interesting. Noah Hawley knocked it out of the park with this. I believe for this season alone, he is the only writer, and to see all these interconnected things, all of these character moments, and all these really in-depth titles and how it all ties together, for one person to have written that, it is pretty tremendous.
Yeah, I think that's the feat of just kind of taking on an entire season alone, right? That takes a little bit of commendation right there. You know, you need to recognize the kind of skill that someone would need to have in order to produce the kind of results that we got in the end. I'm not sure if the show ended up winning, or I know it was nominated for Emmys and I think it's overall like production and I believe some of the writing. I'm not sure if it won any, but this guy knows what he's doing for sure.
Yeah.
I want to kind of go into some of let's start with Lester, right? He, in the beginning, it was kind of given to us as like one of the main kind of characters, our pseudo protagonist we want to follow for now.
You definitely think he's going to be the protagonist. He's our Jerry Lundegaard for this series, our William H. Macy.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's at least at the beginning, he is depicted as being harshly sympathetic.
Yeah, you know, it's like he kind of has the world like against him. Like his wife kind of just treats him like the lesser of him
like
and his
dirt.
Yeah, you know, like he's in a weird marriage right now. He's not really a man of kind of like into his own. You know, he just kind of he deals with like a lot of people's garbage and things that they dump onto him. He doesn't have what it takes to kind of get himself out of that. You know,
part of me wonders though, is like, yes, the world is just pummeling him left and right, sometimes literally, but I do wonder if, like, you know, when I was rewatching it for this episode, how much of it is his fault? How much is it that he's just not trying hard enough, that he's, you know, not putting in enough effort to better himself? that he kind of creates these problems for himself.
I mean, I would agree. Like, I feel like there is two sides to every coin, and that could definitely be a part of it. That he was never, in a way, he never kind of got to that point in his life where he knew how to address those situations. Like, you get the examples with Sam Hess, right? One of the inciting incidents. This guy that is now kind of successful trucker man, but it was also his bully in high school that they talk about. And, he just kind of goes around and pushes him around again, like in their interaction before Sam dies, and Lester ends up in the hospital,
Right.
But outside of being pushed around by his wife and even his brother later on in the series, like, at no point, at a point later on, does Lester find that kind of, let me help myself, but it took a lot for him to get there, and a lot of really bad mishappenings.
It takes a massive catastrophe for him to finally...
I would call it a series of highly irregular catastrophes.
Right, yeah. And we'll get to some of the amazing dialogue of this series, but Lester, yeah, it's fascinating because Martin Freeman does such a good job at finding these little pockets of humanity in all of the horrible, terrible things he does.
How do you like Martin Freeman's accent, as he is a known Englishman?
Oh, he's terrific. He's terrific.
I remember for a while, I think, because I was watching the show before he kind of made his introduction into, like, I think he was in the Marvel movies, and he had done not The Hobbit, right? But he always had this accent, so hearing him speak more American, I guess, is just something that I've been a little more interested in lately. It's seeing how other actors can put on these accents, these identities, and how they go about it. So I was actually really happy. I enjoyed it a lot. He sounded truly authentic.
Oh, yeah.
It just kind of adds another layer to his performance. I'll say this though. You say he brought a lot of humanity, but I feel like he also brought the very antithesis of humanity.
Oh,
there were points where I'm just like, how? Why? Like, this guy needs to go inside of an institution or something.
He walks a very fine line throughout this whole series, and it's really fun because at first you really do want to root for him because, like you said, you think he is this protagonist, but as the series goes on, he embraces that darkness inside of him, and he really lets this vile, horrible person inside of him come out, and both are equally fun to watch.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just he's a character. Let's put it like that. But then you get him put against someone like Billy Bob Thornton's character, right? Malvo.
Lorne Malvo, if that is his real name.
Which, we are given that name as like his identifier, right? Like that's what we want to call him. But you think about it, this is a guy that takes on new identities for different projects, different things that he's doing. And so what if this was just one of those identities, right? But Billy Bob Thornton plays this man, I like to call him like a con man, a confidence man. He plays these identities. He gets these things out of these people like so well, right? That it's just, you see that versus Lester, this kind of man that's not into himself. Like the role of confidence plays such, it's almost like it's a theme in its own for the entirety of the show. And it's the very specific moments, right? The first interaction between Lester and Lorne is just chilling in a way. Lester's in the hospital for, getting beat up almost as an adult, even though it was his fault. He kind of flinched and hit himself against a window or something.
I would still put the blame on Sam Hess there.
You'd still put it on Sam Hess? Whatever.
I mean, he was the one threatening him in the middle of broad daylight, so
okay, there you go. But like
it doesn't make Lester any worse of a human being.
Yeah.
Or any better of a human being, I should say. But
just the having Lester trying to explain this kind of relationship he had with Sam Hess and the events that were happening, and then Lauren's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you let the man talk crap about you like in front of his kids? Like, what are you doing?" And Lester's like,
"Yeah,
don't judge me, guy. You don't know my life." Like, oh my god, And then kind of you hear Malvo moving on and having these kind of conversations with other people throughout the show or throughout the series, and then just causing and disturbing all these things. In my family, we have this phrase that I wanted to kind of go about saying, that someone who just goes and just bothers all these people unnecessarily, we call them a shit disturber. Right. and that is what Billy Bob Thornton's Malvo is. He is a shit disturber.
100% a shit disturber.
Through and through. I don't know. I don't know how else I feel about that.
No, absolutely. He's a fire starter. I always kind of like imagine he is this fun mashup of Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men and the Joker.
Oh, I was going to say, because Michael Caine's line of like, some men just want to watch the world burn. That's him.
He's an agent of chaos. And I mean, I don't think there is a point in this series where he goes somewhere and doesn't screw with somebody.
Oh my God.
He goes to the hotel, he tells the kid at the hotel to pee in his boss's
his gas tank, and then calls the boss saying that someone's peeing outside. Oh God, what a great kind of like contrast. But you know what I also like looking at is like people that go and look at that kind of like attitude that he kind of puts out and just reacting in kind of the opposite way, that they're not going to get taken advantage of because he just looks like a weirdo to them. Right? So, and like the manager in the beginning of that scene when they're at the motel, he gets the room, is talking about like the rules, and he's making such a big deal playing on this idea. Oh, I'm a man of institutions. I want to know the rules. She's like, yeah, dude, just, you don't have pets? Okay, so what the hell? Or like,
I love it. He's just probing and seeing what he can get away with.
Yeah.
And
I like that there's people that he really can't get away with much. You know, like...
Well, yes. Go ahead.
No, it's just, that was a really, it's a good way to show that, like, okay, so he can't get away with everything, though he's gotten away with a lot as is.
I would say the two interactions he has in this season where you can tell he is slightly, where you see the real Malvo poking through. One, I think, is his conversation with Mr. Wrench in the hospital, where he actually offers a bit of respect, which is not something I think anyone else in the series gets from him. The other is Lou in the diner. Lou, I think, being the one person who Malvo's horrible malevolence can't crack,
Yeah, Lou did say something like, I didn't quite like his demeanor.
Yeah.
I would agree, like, yeah, there was an interesting... I actually felt like there was a point where later in the season where Lester meets Malvo again in Vegas, and then Malvo proceeds to murder the people in the elevator and then suggests to Lester, like, oh, help me take their bodies to the dumpster, before Lester, like, quickly thinks, oh, let me try to knock him out or something.
Which does not work.
I just felt like, okay, and maybe in that moment, like, Malvo had lowered his defenses and was really like, okay, well, I mean, listen, if we're doing this, fuck it, right? So that was just an interesting, I guess, kind of, we get that reflection there as well of him being that's probably him at his most normal.
Yeah. I think what I like about, especially the relationship between Malvo and Lester, and I think you get it with so many character interactions in the whole series, in the movie, is this idea of people finding themselves in the right place in the wrong time, or the wrong place at the right time, and how when that happens you get these impacts of characters who under normal circumstances should never have met, like Lester and Malvo, and the chaos that ensues from those chance meetings.
Well, I think that kind of plays into some of the other characters, like Molly and Gus, right? Like, yep. I like, there's a lot of, maybe this isn't much allusion as to, like, there's a lot of scenes where Gus is meeting people in bathrooms, right? I don't know if you noticed, but it's just like, that's just a place where police officers meet, right? And then you kind of got this going later on where there's this officer that's guarding Mr. Wrench's room at the hospital.
Yeah.
And he decides he needs to take a bathroom break, and lo and behold, Malvo's hiding in one of the stalls and chokes him out, and it's just,
That whole scene, I couldn't stop thinking Malvo is probably being peed on right now.
It is what it is. But I kind of want to transition then, kind of go back to Colin Hanks' character, Gus Grimley, and Allison, I forget her, Tolman's, character, Molly, I was going to say Gunderson.
Salverson.
Gunderson's the next season.
Gunderson is,
is the other guy.
Is the movie.
Yeah, it's the movie.
That's Frances McDormand, and she is a total Marge Gunderson, especially after the time skip.
I would say maybe, though, there's a sense of, again, like, less confidence or, like, less of, like, kind of into her shoes even before then. Right? Well, she's very good at what she does.
It builds to it. It's the formation of a character. And but when she really gets into it, when she really commits to the to solving the mystery and getting Lester, she definitely takes on that same attitude, that tenacity that Frances McDormand has in the movie.
I'd agree.
And then, of course, after the time skip, when she's doing all of that and she's pregnant, I mean, it's almost 1-to-1.
It's just kind of incredible. Her come up, though, is super important. Very first episode, I liked her with the chief, or I guess the original chief.
Yeah.
I liked the relationship that they had because she was going through the crime scene and everything, trying to check off all her boxes and everything. Though she would still miss a few things, like the dead deer or the body in the trunk. I don't know if she missed the body per se. I forget a little bit, but. And then the chief's kind of commending her. I'm like, it's all right. It just comes with experience. But, I know that you're going to be great at it. You'll be the next chief and everything. She's like, really? You think so? And not Bill, who Bill Oswald played by Bob Odenkirk, another great character in the entire show.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting to see that kind of support already from episode 1 that, like, she's going to do great things moving forward,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's really great. Her relationship with Chief Thurman is fantastic. Chief Thurman himself, when you watch that first episode, you really feel like this dude's got an expiration date kind of stamped on his forehead.
Oh, it's so traumatic. It's it's the worst thing that happened.
You know what? Even though I don't take away points from the show for being predictable in this one aspect. Mm-hmm. It is very predictable. You're like, okay, the dude's got a kid on the way. He's talking with his wife about what color to paint the nursery and stuff. And you're like, of course this dude's going to die. He has to die. But I love that it's not so much a matter of if he's going to die or not and whether or not, like, his character has been established enough to make the death sad, but that he is so supportive of Molly. Yeah. And he's willing to hear her out on things, and he commends her when she makes these connections.
Real detective work and everything.
And you really feel that as the series goes on when he is dead and everyone else is like, doesn't want to bother with Molly's theories.
Yeah.
And you're like, God, I wish Thurman was here because he had the right of it.
I should have seen this kind of thing coming when watching another show. More recently, I guess, Watchmen, that just came out on HBO. Because Don Johnson's character, I guess, something happens to him at the end of the episode. I don't know if that's too soon, right?
We'll save it.
Yeah, but it's just like, I should have seen things like tropes like this coming up sooner than I really didn't. It just kind of made me blindsided. Or had me blindsided. And you know what? Man, it just broke my heart. Just knowing about the wife and being pregnant. He had the 2 paint cans in his car. And what sucks is that this is all Lester's fault, man. In reality, it's like you can't. Just why? Like, everything that happens in this show is just because Lester was a dumbass. I'm just sorry, plain and simple. All the events that happened in the show just because Malvo could have gone and done whatever. Like he didn't need to stay in Bemidji, but Lester had to be a fucking. I don't know what else to call it.
Going back to like Molly and Gus, their whole relationship once they kind of come into each other's orbits. It's really fun to watch.
Quality courtship right there. I don't think I've seen more tension between two unsure people ever in my life. But you know what? I felt so much more invested into their relationship, and because of that, because it was less of like a. I don't know if I've seen too many people or relationships like that versus someone who's very sure that they're going to get the girl or I feel like even looking at something like Game of Thrones in comparison to this, like Jon and Daenerys or
the redheaded woman.
Whatever. Just like this relationship, I'm invested in through and through from the very beginning to the end. There's something super cute about it, super nice.
I think what helps with like making the relationship feel really solid is that they're both on this quest to expose the truth of what's going on, to get to the real heart of the crime spree that's going through Bemidji and where's Gus.
Well, I do want to say, like Molly's tracked for that is pretty like, through and through, like, like she's got a pretty good track record going into the case and everything versus Gus. I got to say he's quite a mess.
He's the world's worst cop.
Yeah. And Colin Hanks does a great job of just kind of embodying that and has the best expressions and just everything kind of going in. Cause the first episode alone, he pulls the guy over, and though I completely understand, like he's fearful of his life. This guy's making threats to him. If he wants to go down this route, right? Like we could do that, but then he hears the daughter call over the radio, and he gets scared.
Yeah.
And it doesn't turn out till like the next day or so that like, oh no, that was the guy that we needed to arrest. He's like wanted, and then he's like, crap. And then you get the infamous line there in the. That where he admits to his chief in Duluth in the bathroom. Yeah. Like, he pulled the guy over. He's like, oh, this is Sioux Falls all over again.
Yeah. And which I want to talk about that in a minute because of the implications of that line. But right. Gus, I think he's a bit in over his head when it comes to his police work. He even says he never wanted to be a police officer.
Exactly.
He did it because they needed more men with the badge, and so he signed up.
He wanted the simple life. He wanted the mailman life. And to be honest, we could probably use a few mailmen right now, with all the issues going on. Yeah.
And it's funny how similar he is to someone like Bill Oswalt, Bob Odenkirk's character, in that the pressures of police work are just too much for them.
Oh, yeah, Bob Odenkirk's character can't even stand the sight of blood. Just makes him vomit.
Yeah, not even a woman's monthly, as he calls it.
Oh, God.
There's so many wonderful lines. But
it's just very representative also of that kind of place, that location in, like, America, right?
Yeah.
Like, would you call it, like, the northern Midwest?
I'm not
sure about the region.
Everyone is just, like, polite to a fault.
Yeah,
it's great, and I like every moment where Gus tries to be a little more cold and a little bit tougher, and a lot of times it's thrown in his face. There's the great line when one of the people at the station's like, okay, you're on animal control duty, Joe's sick again, and he's like, oh, he's sick, oh, what's he got, the cancer?
Like, oh, yeah, leukemia.
Yeah, leukemia.
It's like, oh, jeez.
It's such a great line, but it also is like, being that, like, cold and detached person, it's not him. And
no, at all. I mean, I think it comes with the territory too, right? He's a single dad, like maybe he's also kind of learning to be a little more sensitive about things, but when he doesn't, it's just, I love I want to skip ahead a little bit, but at the very end, he's at the highest point in his cop career. It's also the most stressful for him. He's out with his gun drawn in a snowstorm, and his perpetrators are in front of him. Mr. Wrench, Mr. Numbers, and even Lauren Malvo's at the scene. And his only backup is Molly. And he can't see anything. So the first shadow he sees, he shoots. And the next episode, it's Molly. And he's like, "Oh,
no, I think it's the same episode."
Oh, I don't remember if we got the reveal or not.
Yeah, we
found out it's Molly, but we didn't know if she was alive or dead or what had happened.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, but it's just I love his reaction the day after because it's just another it's another great step into their blossoming relationship of like.
How he keeps sending her flowers, her desk is just like covered in flower arrangements.
It's become a botanical garden, and then she's laying in the hospital bed. He's just like, "You lost a spleen. I promise I'll get you a new one." And
it's pretty endearing.
I wonder if I were to tell a woman in courtship like she lost her spleen at my own, because of me, and I said, I promise I'll find you a new one, like how that would go in the real world. I'm sure it's super endearing, but when Lou Solverson finds out, oh boy, betcha.
Lou Solverson, I think he's terrific. Keith Carradine, brother of David Carradine, he's really just a treat as Lou.
Oh my god. But
for such a small role in the series, he nails it. He brings a lot of humanity to that role.
It's his blossoming relationship with the daughter Grimley, Greta Grimley.
Yeah, played by Joey King.
Oh my god, who's now come into her own as a good actress, right? She had her series on Hulu with Patricia Arquette. She was Emmy nominated, and now she has a couple of other movies I've seen come out on Netflix.
I know for a while she was kind of doing a lot of these cheap, shitty horror movies, but I think she grew out of that pretty quick.
I feel like she's doing really good, and listen, she had some great roots on Fargo, and like I want to say, go back to her relationship with Lou is just really endearing. As soon as they become a family after the time skip, it's just super nice. That
he has that great line where he's like, "You're my favorite granddaughter. I didn't order through the mail or something."
Oh my god, yeah, it was. And then I just we gonna go fishing later, and it's fantastic. And then when he's sitting on the porch wanting to defend the family while the Molly and Gus are out there, trying to go catch Malvo, he's sitting on the porch with a shotgun, and then she comes out with her BB gun. He's like, "What are you gonna
shooter?"
Yeah, he says, "What are you gonna do with that?" It's like, "Well, I can poke his eyes out, and you can finish him off." And it's the best moment.
They play off each other pretty well. It's really great to watch.
I will say, and it's really great that the next season really explores Lou Solverson, and Patrick Wilson playing him is just fantastic.
So yeah, I want to get into that because, like you said, from I think it's the second episode or the third episode, but they have this great line from Lieutenant Schmidt, who is Grimley's boss. And where he mentions, it's goddamn Sioux Falls all over again. And it's this, in and of itself, it's a great just one-off line where you're like, okay, that's fun. I've always liked the joke of just addressing, acknowledging something that happened in the past, and there's no need to delve into it. If it had stood as a joke, it would have been fine. It would have been funny. But the fact that they worked it into the show is incredible. And when you watch that scene, having seen season 2, which spoilers, goes into what happened at Sioux Falls, when you rewatch that scene, even the way he says it carries a lot of weight. He doesn't say it in a jokey manner. He says it of a person who has seen some shit.
But it's almost like it's so subtle too, right? Like you wouldn't have ever thought. And I know Sioux Falls is mentioned maybe 3 or 4 times in the first season, even by Lou himself a couple of times.
Yep.
But it's just I'm really glad to see that subtle weight, right? Maybe it wasn't 50 pounds. It was 5 pounds of material. It worked its way into one of probably the best finales of television I've seen in a while.
Yeah. And I mean, I love when Malvo is at Lou's diner and Lou is recounting what happened at Sioux Falls. And again, he's not really saying any specifics, but the way he talks about it, this is the way he says, the bodies, if you stacked them high, you reach the second story. It paints this horror story of something that, you know, happened and you don't know what's going on, but the fact that it keeps coming up, you can tell, like, it gives this world a lot of history.
Yeah.
And it creates a lot of intrigue. It's a, you know, to quote J.J. Abrams, it's a mystery box.
I want to kind of go into another, not necessarily a mystery box, but like into that mystery, the intrigue that is created by the series. Excuse me, I swung my pop filter for a second. Is that the show Fargo itself is, and the idea of what Fargo is that though not a lot of the locations take place in the city, it's just more of like they have this relationship, and in this season they kind of gear it towards like this crime syndicate that is located in Fargo, right?
Yeah, and now I'll say real fast, the reason the movie was called Fargo was because I believe the Coens didn't want to name the movie Brainerd, which is the city that the movie takes place in.
Right.
And I think that was like the main driving force for why it was called Fargo. But yeah, in the series, Fargo's given a lot more weight as an actual thing in the story.
So it kind of relates to all the characters, right? You have, it's mentioned earlier, it says like Sam Hess, this guy that owns this trucking company, actually has ties with this Fargo criminal organization, right?
Yeah.
And once Sam Hess dies, then the Fargo organization has sent Mr. Wrench and Mr. Numbers to investigate what the hell happened. You know, and on the opposite end, you have this lone wolf, Lorne Malvo, who kind of does contract killings in a way. He's a bounty hunter of sorts, but he's also not. I just refer to him. I know he says in, I think episode 8 or something that like, oh, there goes that $100,000 bounty. So I'm like, okay. So there's something going on there in his mercenary world, but right. He works for an organization that I guess has a relationship with the Fargo kind of syndicate.
Yeah, as Mr. Rundle of Rundle Realty kind of says that when they put a hit out on Malvo, it had to have been personal because otherwise they would have smoothed it out.
Yeah, and they didn't hear anything like about it, so it couldn't have been something that like they would have done overtly or anything like that. So I mean, that's like a really interesting bit of world building there, like the sense of like there's crime in this world, you know, like things are happening. It comes to a point where it's like because Malvo's kind of get mixed up in all this Lester business, you know, and now Malvo killed Sam Hess for Lester. Like now Fargo's kind of like looking for the guy that ruined that part of their operation, you know, and then he gets mixed up with them, and then kind of Malvo gets put down this rabbit hole of because he helped Lester. Now he has to go and terminate the whole Fargo complex.
I love that scene, by the way. That is such a fun scene of him just tearing through that building. That
building, doing everything. And it's also when we get a great cameo by, or actually 2 cameos, and roles as well by Key and Peele. Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele.
Key and Peele, like, in, like, the height of their popularity.
Yeah. Well, I would say even now they're pretty popular, but, like, as for the show, yeah.
I'm pretty sure this was, like, when they were still doing the show. And it was such a fun thing to be like, oh, my God, they're in this, and they're kind of, the way they play off each other is very Key and Peele.
Yeah, they have, like, the same relationship almost in everything that you see them in together. But, I mean, it's really, I don't know, they're just really funny guys, you know, like, and
they bring a lot of fun charm to the series for their time in it.
Yeah, honestly, I was, you know, it's one of the other cameos that I was super happy to see in the show. I guess one of Malvo's jobs, kind of after he finished his, I don't know what they call the city of the first job he was in, where he had to yank the guy out of the building and
was that Duluth?
That one wasn't Duluth. Duluth was his second one because that's what led us to Phoenix Farms, right, where we get Oliver Platt's character,
Stavros Milos.
Stavros Milos, who was the man that happened upon a very big thing. He found the briefcase that we saw in the film. It was the linking moment.
He finds Carl Showalter's briefcase and ice scraper from the movie. I remember when I was first watching the show on television, seeing that and being like, "Oh my gosh, the movie is canon! This is all happening in one big universe. It was such a fun little moment. That's actually what I was talking about before when I said up until that moment, up until the point that you see that ice scraper framed, it's understandable to think that this show is just a retelling of the movie's events, but then to find out that no, this is actually, the movie did happen. I think it's really cool.
I mean, I just kind of like a great homage one, and also like another good way, like, though I said earlier, the show still stands apart from the movie itself, but like, and it gave us enough background for the briefcase and the little shovel, but it put it all together so well, right? Like it was crafted beautifully. And though whether that was the help of the Coens being a part of the show, or whether it was just Noah Hawley like paying homage and just using it to his advantage, whichever outcome it could have been, well done to everyone.
Yeah, and I think the trail you were kind of going on there is the appearance of one Glenn Howerton.
Of being, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia infamy, if you will.
Yeah, playing the role of Dawn Chumph, who is Stavros Milos' wife's
like personal trainer or something. Yeah. Oh my God! First of all, only have I ever seen Glenn Howerton in It's Always Sunny. I think I saw a trailer for like a small movie he did, and I know he's got the show on
I saw him
NBC as AP Bio. He's like,
yeah, and then he was also in the Will Ferrell movie All Things Must Go.
Okay, there you go. But it was just happening upon him in this show is just kind of, man, it's just great. He does this wonderful accent. Everybody has the same accent in the show, but him, the golden god, right, from It's Always Sunny, it's just seeing him kind of stoop to this other level. He's this personal trainer, very thin guy. You'd never think he's a personal trainer. He just wears like tracksuits, and then he's like, oh, I got bronzer on you, like sprays himself with a tan every morning.
He is a funny character in this series. Just
I know.
A real, kind of like, as his name would imply, he's kind of a chump.
Oh my God.
He's just this
dopishly
douchey fool of a man.
What is kind of interesting is to see his relationship with Malvo, right? And just he kind of becomes Malvo's like, boy, if you will.
He becomes his lackey, yeah.
Yeah, like he has to drive him around, and then he also has to run all the errands so that, because Malvo's now involved with his Duluth execution is of Oliver Platt, or I guess that's the guy he's supposed to be after in this.
Yeah, so that's where I was a little confused. I guess, was he meant to kill Stavros Milos?
I don't know if it was kill as much as like disturb.
I think, yeah, he was just meant to kind of destabilize him.
He's a shit disturber. Wherever he can do anything, he'll do it.
Right, but clearly he was contracted. We get the great scene when he gets the book in the mail, in the mail center.
You mean when the mail the mail captain says, "Oh, well, this is highly irregular."
Yeah, and we get the great line, highly irregular is when I found a human foot in a toaster oven. This is just odd.
Oh God.
It's a great line, but I don't know what his job was with Stavros Milos, but
I think, he had to disguise himself as a contractor to figure out, because Stavros had the ransom note, right, for $40,000 that was ended up being brought upon by Glenn Howerton's character, who was the personal trainer, right?
Yeah, Don.
Yeah. So, and then he kind of worked his way both angles, right? He was helping Stavros, but then he was also helping Don as well, while fooling the both of them. And really, he never got anything out of it, right? We just saw this series of unfortunate events play out.
I think as we see in Las Vegas, he's willing to give up on a contract if he sees that there's fun to be had. Because I think he's a person who really gets off to the misery in other people that he creates.
Oh, we actually especially see that when we realize he keeps like a record of calls and tapes from from his victims in a way.
All the people whose lives he's ruined.
And it's just like, dude, that's that extra level of like sinister, mysterious energy upon this character that really brings you down. And I think it really sits, it sits on you, the weight of that, when he's sitting in his home in what was it, Michigan, or I forget the city. It was. It was in
the time skip.
After the time skip, he actually lives in Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah.
Funny enough, is what it is. And then he's sitting in like his office or whatever groovy looking room that was.
Yeah.
Just listening to the tapes, like just by himself, like the most content look on his face, and it's just really disturbing.
He's this, a real twisted person, and we really see that with Dawn at the end of Dawn's story, where
he's finally used him to every degree that he's needed him for, and
Malvo sets up this horrible like doomsday trap of taping him up so it looks like he's holding the shotgun and rigging the assault rifle with a tripwire
to the house. Yeah, he calls the police and everything, or I guess he doesn't call. The neighbors call because they were being shot at.
Because he starts shooting people. But I love the moment when because Don's whole shtick is he's going to open up a massage parlor called Turkish Delight, and when Malvo says, by the way, Turkish Delights are disgusting, the look on Don's face, that final insult that he's been given, and he pulls the trigger on the shotgun only to find out that it's empty. Mm-hmm. I loved it. It was so great. It added a lot of.
I really liked his line that he delivered after. Is like, I'd be insulted if you didn't at least try.
Yeah, but I love it because even with Don, you could get away with that just being kind of a funny character. Kill him off and be done with it. But they do add like kind of these layers of, this is a human being. This is somebody who can be insulted. As much of an idiot as he is, there is a point when he is pushed too far. It just so happens that being pushed too far is a little too late.
Yeah.
But you also see that later in the series with Linda, Lester's second wife, where even though she doesn't know all the details, she covers for Lester when he's being questioned by Molly. And again, this is a character who has been very much on the periphery. She is not a major player, and for as much as you can tell leading up to this moment, she is
very unaware of everything.
She's very oblivious to everything that's going on. But to see her,
if she would have known what Lester was doing the night before at that bar in Vegas, I think she would have had other thoughts. I don't know.
Right, but the fact that she speaks up and covers for him, it shows like a level of agency that she can see what's going on, and she knows enough that she should probably say something. And
it's a nice amount of loyalty too,
I just like that all these little character moments are given to even like small characters that don't really matter in the long run.
I do want to kind of talk about two character moments specifically, because it kind of relates to something we were talking about earlier, where I felt like these moments, as powerful as they should have been, or as they still are, like they could have been even more powerful. And it goes to Bob Odenkirk's character Bill Oswalt, mm-hmm. and Allison Thurman, right? Her character Tolman, excuse me, God. Allison Tolman's character Molly, like they both had scenes where they had these powerful monologues, right? But these scenes were like kind of encapsulated in scenes where there were shared dialogue between other characters.
Right.
Molly's was her, Mr. Wrench, and Bill's was Bill and Molly.
Yeah.
So Molly goes to Mr. Wrench in the hospital before Malvo does, and kind of talks to him or communicates with him after Mr. Number's death. Mr. Number's not there, so he can't help translate. So she gets him the whiteboard. They have a brief conversation, and then Molly just starts kind of opening up about like just kind of things that happen, and then just kind of shares a story. And then, we're kind of left with like this really great, like kind of emotional conversation from her. But we get a slight cut back to Mr. Wrench, like mm-hmm. in the seat. But there was this really great kind of push into her face and everything, and I just felt like we saw this in in Jaws. Right, when Quint is kind of giving his monologue, this is like the show don't tell thing, like, and with actors specifically that are really good at performing, and like can capture emotion in the dialogue that they say. like that. This is the moment where restraint in terms of the editing, where if it would have just been her face, same thing with Bill Oswald. Like Bill had the same scene, kind of opening up to Molly about like retiring from Chief and just like whatever happened to leaving your door unlocked, and like the only thing you had to worry about was like shoveling your neighbor's like lawn or whatever he said.
Right,
and,
right.
And it's just, and Bill and Molly have a conversation after the fact, but it cut back to Molly for a moment just to see her reaction. But we didn't really need that. I feel like we got enough reaction from both Mr. Wrench when he communicated early and Molly as she communicates in the latter of the scene. And it's just like, these moments would have meant so much more, I feel like. Not that they weren't already great, they just could have been even greater if the editing had been a little more restrained.
I, for one, love the scene between Mr. Wrench and Molly because that is the show's big reference to Marge Gunderson's talk with, what's his name? Peter Stormare's character in the movie. I think even some of the lines are good. All this violence, all this, and for what? For a little bit of money. I think it gets to the root of, one of the big questions this series asks is like, what is the point of all this violence and all this death and destruction? That I think even one of the things I appreciated that them showing Mr. Wrench is that, his reactions and all of this is, how she talks about his partner's dead, on top of everything, he's lost a friend, and you see that does affect him. And I really like that. They treated this character, again, small character, doesn't really factor into the story too much. I like that they gave him a lot of depth. That's why, spoilers, when he pops up in season 3, it is such an exciting thing where you're like, oh my god, it's Mr. Wrench.
I like though, like how he kind of hasn't changed, right? Like he was arrested, he's still into crime, but like he kind of goes out of his way to help the person like that he ends up teaming up with and everything. Like, super fulfilling, really great character arc.
Yeah, love and then the whole thing with Bill Oswald, I also really love that scene. I felt it was very reminiscent of Tommy Lee Jones's character in No Country for Old Men. It's a police chief who has just, he grew up with this very wholesome
idea of the world,
and of exactly. And he's coming up against an enemy he no longer understands. Yeah, and I think there's a real tragedy to it. I think the way Bill Oswald says it, he says it's an unquiet mind. He's never wanted to be the one to think about the morality of the world and the meaning of it all, and how it's pushed him to drinking more, and how he finds himself just staring into the fire. Bob Odenkirk,
super humanizing scene, but I mean, like, no, go ahead. He's an incredible actor.
For as much as he plays like these funny roles, and as funny as some of his line delivery as Bill Oswald is, he is so good at finding like these things about the character that really make them pop off the screen.
You know what I think it comes from is because Bob Odenkirk is a writer, right? Like he used to write for SNL. What is that? It wasn't Adult Swim. It was Tim and Eric he was a part of. It was
the show with David Cross.
Oh yeah, that's what it was.
Mr.
The Mr. Show or something like that. Yeah. Like he comes from this background, and though a lot of the stuff he did was comedy and things like that, but I feel like as someone who kind of has his hands into other kind of creative spheres, and the fact that he then can apply those things to acting, like, dude, and even in Better Call Saul, like, and in Breaking Bad, when you got all of his moments as Saul Goodman and Jimmy McGill, like, tremendous acting. I don't think he was nominated for this show, but I severely think he should have been. He's
such a great actor. And it takes you by surprise because he is such a funny dude. Yeah. That you almost don't see it coming. So when he finally has this admission of like, I'm in over my head and I'm scared of the of what the world is becoming, it really hits, I think, a lot harder than if it had been anyone else.
Yeah, I agree. And it just kind of, looking back on it, I just feel like I like how you mentioned the Coen Brothers' No Country for Old Men. I feel like that's actually my favorite Coen Brothers film, right?
It's up there for me.
And that last bit with Tommy Lee Jones, oh God, beautiful! Just what a great kind of comparison.
This season of Fargo does also have some other pretty cool references to it. I think I talked to you about there's the scene in Rundle Realty between Malvo and Mr. Rundle.
Oh yeah,
where he says, if you, I have two phones, one that can call the hospital, one that can call the hearse or whatever, and when he leaves, you don't know if he killed him or not, and it's I think very obviously meant to
reminiscent of Anton Chigurh's one of his last victims, if you will.
I think his last victim in the movie.
That's true.
But yeah, I just think even like Malvo has a scene where his leg has been fucked up and he is just he's having to fix his leg.
Oh God!
And which is a insane scene to watch.
A little intense.
Again, very very much. I felt a reference to Anton Chigurh, who also had to fix his own leg in No Country for Old Men.
Yeah, after the car accident and everything?
Yeah. Oh, no, excuse me, after Josh Brolin shot him with a shotgun.
Oh, that's true. I think he had to fix his arm at the end of the car accident.
At the car crash, I think he pays a kid for his shirt and then...
It wraps around or something.
Yeah, makes like a sling.
A sling. Yeah, that's what it is.
But yeah, I think, this the way this show kind of acknowledges its pedigree is really cool.
I think it's super telling of kind of the impressiveness that it has to offer, and also it's a great starting season to even, I would say, some of better seasons. Like, I guess number one, I think maybe critically viewed as the highest, but personally, my favorite season was season 3.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
I loved everything about season 3. Absolutely everything.
Season 3 is great.
But that's we're ranking incredibly good material, so it's not that any of them are bad. I would say even objectively, I don't think they're bad shows. Like,
no, they're extremely good shows.
My opinion is fact in this situation.
My personal favorite season is season 2. But that's for again my personal taste. I do think season 1 is immaculately constructed. I think there are so many little details in the first season that I love come up here and there. In the first episode alone, Lester's whole thing with the washing machine and how it rocking back and forth, it is this visual metaphor for his, like, the terrible life he's in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this great shot right at the beginning in the first episode when he goes downstairs to look at it, and it's framed, the shot is framed looking at the washing machine, and as it's rocking, you can see his reflection captured in the window of the washing machine, and it's like he is trapped in this nightmare, spinning, out of control.
Yeah.
And later on when he gets the new washing machine, they have the same shot, but he is not reflected in the window. He is free of that.
And he just kind of opens his doors, to like this new life that he wants to create.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love his poster, the what if they're wrong and you're right.
Yeah. Oh, what I liked was the signs that were in like his bedroom. I thought they were super telling. I think I wrote them down right here, what they said. One of them was just like, sorry, it says, the wall art says, "Go confidently in the world of your dreams, live the life you want." And that's exactly what he ends up doing. What he doesn't know is that his dreams are just dreams, and the world comes crumbling down around him as time goes on.
Yeah, he
he didn't do a good job cementing himself in that world.
No, he definitely did not. I'm trying to think of other like little details. I
think one bit that we kind of skipped over, or that we didn't go into too much detail on, was like kind of Oliver Platt's situation with like all the kind of threats and like the ransoms for the money. Like, you know, it was all very, you know, reflective of kind of his journey with God, and kind of, I guess specifically if you look at the book of Exodus, you know, and the kind of the plagues that God had put upon Egypt, they were kind of brought upon him. But though these were all plagues that he didn't realize were all made by Malvo, who ended up working against him.
Right. So I think this ties into what happens towards the end of his part of the story, where he goes to he's going to give in to the $1 million ransom, and then just finally decides against it, and his son Dimitri is killed when inexplicably it starts raining fish.
Dude, poor Dimitri. Talk about like an unnecessary fate.
Yeah, so that is episode 6. That is the Buridan's ass episode. Yeah. And that, so I love that episode, one, because I think we touched on it in our notes, that, you know, like you said, he's getting all these plagues put on him, and, you know, through Malvo, and he is, you know, he's had like, you know, his shower turns to blood, and there were locusts in his shopping center, or in his grocery store, I should say, and it's all these things that are meant to unhinge him. And
yeah,
I saw this, the raining fish. I kind of have two theories of it, but one being that it is this wrath of God for him failing to see the devil in front of him. Mm-hmm. That being Malvo, obviously.
That's actually a nice like use of symbolism right there.
Yeah. The other is that Malvo, he's always talking about how humans are predators. You know, he equates humans to wolves a lot. He is sometimes symbolically shown as a wolf, especially I think from the perspective of Gus Grimley.
Right.
And he talks about how Rome was built by wolves, specifically, you know, the story of Remus and Romulus.
Yeah.
I believe that's the right one. But so I think, you know, when you get Dimitri being killed by the fish, by the raining fish, I found it interesting that episode starts with the criminal syndicate in Fargo, and they're eating at this restaurant, and the first thing you see in the episode is a fish being killed by a person.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the episode, you have humans being killed by fish.
Oh.
And it's this, you know, cruel nature of the world that I feel like, you know, Malvo's always kind of poking at.
I would say that actually sounds like a way more logical idea than what mine was. Because in mine, I kind of just accepted it as like a random act, like a happening, if you will. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, as we know, in the later seasons, there are also a couple of other random acts that just happen upon people. And
yeah.
I just kind of accepted, like, okay, like, this is the random thing of this season, or that's the random thing of that season, you know?
Yeah,
I think you then showed me, though, that this is actually a phenomenon that's actually happened in real life, though.
Yeah, I looked it up. It's called a rain of animals.
Oh.
And bizarre. But, yeah, I just think, you know, there's so many of these interesting moments with Stavros. He's the way he has, like, you know, he sees these things unfolding, and
what a tragedy through and through.
Yeah, the way that Malvo kind of gets into his mind. I also love the scene when I forget his name, but Stavros Milos' like bodyguard goes to intimidate Malvo.
Oh yeah, and then Malvo just kind of ignores him and just opens the crapper and just takes a seat.
Shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. One thing we can quickly touch on is some very good I guess you'd say maybe it's makeup work. The what they did with Lester's hand.
With the bullet, with the shotgun shell, or I guess the pellet from the shell.
Yeah, and like I love that the what do you call it, infection and the horrible, disease look of his hands.
Yeah, the injury just kind of gets worse and worse as
and
his...
it's kind of like his I don't know if I would say like it's his conscience, but it's like it's this.
I would equate it to that, right? Like it's just as the lies get worse, and as he just kind of furthers himself down that rabbit hole, so does the pain he feels from this thing. It just gets worse and worse and worse until one day it kind of like comes out, and he finds a newer scapegoat to kind of get himself out of that hole. Which, oh god, the sinister. I think I kind of want to end on that, right? Like, because that the ending of that episode 6, where Lester's in the hospital, he gets the pellet removed finally.
Oh yeah.
But during his time in the hospital, he's looking for ways to get out without, like there's a cop outside and he needs to get out of the room. He needs to fix some things before the rest of the story develops, right? Before he gets the cases then out of his hands. He doesn't have much of a defense. So then he starts planning evidence upon his brother, his nephew, like these poor people, just adds another layer of his story.
I love it because when he is in Chaz's garage and he is planting the evidence and he looks to their family photo and he sees Gordo in the picture and he has this look on his face where it's like you think like he for a moment you're like, oh, he's realizing what a horrible person he's being, but no. He doubles down on his awfulness and plants the gun into Gordo's bag.
Yeah, not to mention like his daring escape out of the hospital too, right? Like he stole someone, like a nurse's car. He disguised himself as another patient to get out, and just like there's no, you thought that he'd already been done the worst of it, but this actually puts the cherry on top. And what I love the most, and this is what I feel like is my final thought, is just. He ends the entire episode ends with him just kind of sitting back in the chair or in his hospital bed after he'd gotten back and just found himself in, and it's just him with like this look on his mouth, like it almost goes from a frown to like a subtle hinted like evil smile. And it's just like and if I were to kind of like what is this show in kind of like as like an overall like a seal, I'd stamp that smile kind of on it, like that just like shift from like frown to like kind of subtle nod, happy. It's kind of tongue in cheek in a way, right? Like they knew what they were doing the entire time, kind of
absolutely
messing with us. I mean, of course they did, but it's just like
so there's two other things I wanted to touch about. One was related to what you were just talking about, and that's the beginning of the episode after that, with the slow build to the reveal that Gordo has the gun in his bag and the subsequent finding of the evidence in Chaz's locker. I think are so well done. There's that quote from Alfred Hitchcock where he talks about building tension and suspense of like you tell your audience there's a bomb under the table that'll go off in 5 minutes, and the tension comes from watching people who don't know what's about to happen go about their lives knowing something horrible is about to happen. And I think that the beginning of this episode is so good at capturing that, because the gun's in Gordo's bag, the evidence is in Chaz's locker, and you're just waiting on the edge of your seat knowing it is all going to go horrible for them very soon, and watching it unfold is honestly pretty sad to watch. The other thing,
these undeserving people, they didn't need this.
Yeah, no, it's awful in that moment.
This show really played with my emotions.
It really does. And the last thing I want to touch on is the ending of the series, because one thing I have always loved,
the series or the season.
Yeah, excuse me, the season. But they do this. They did this with the movie. They did this with every season of the show so far. It is a tradition I hope holds up with the 4th season, but Fargo always has a happy ending. And I love that so much because they are bringing some of the darkest storytelling and some of the most horrible people, and to end it on a good note, I think is a really strong message, and I think it's always pushed this idea of like, even though there are forces in the world that are just the deepest evil, and even though these forces exist in the world and they walk amongst us, in the end, goodness does prevail.
Yeah.
And it's such a good way to end a story. And I realize not every story has to have a happy ending.
No,
but when you see these good characters struggle for so long against these heinous evils, to see them come out on top, it's so rewarding.
I'll tell you what, it's more like all the well-deserved ones kind of end up where they want to be. Like anybody, like versus this guy, Lester,
Lester.
He, you didn't need him to have a good ending, but everybody else, like that, Molly, Gus, Lou, Bob, in a way, like everybody who had something coming to them got what they deserved, right? And that's just, it's just a testament to the writing of the show, the direction that they went in, just, all in all, overall great piece of work. I can't wait for season 4, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Super excited.
Do you have any predictions for season 4?
I don't really. I'm hoping that there's a connection between season 4 takes place 20 years before the events of season 2.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to see more of a connection between them, like something about the I forget the name of the crime family from season 2. Excuse me.
Oh, the Gerhardts.
The Gerhardts. I want to see, does that play? Do we get to see a younger version of the matriarch of the Gerhardts or something like that?
That would be interesting.
I think so. Or maybe her husband or something like that. Because they're Kansas City, right? And Kansas City had been barking at the locations of, it wasn't Fargo season 2, it was a couple of other locations.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the same feeling you are, where I definitely want to see some of the more connective tissue.
Yeah. But I'm also looking forward to Chris Rock's performance and Jason Schwartz and all these new guys. Ooh.
I think my big theory going in is that so in season 2, when shit is starting to hit the fan, you get the line of somebody saying, "Oh my God, it's Grand Rapids all over again," and it's just this funny line of like, "Aha, we referenced Sioux Falls, and now we're doing a season on Sioux Falls." And wouldn't you know it, when Sioux Falls is going on, there's something. It's just like Grand Rapids.
It's one of those things, yeah.
Now I'm wondering, because we're going further back in time, I'm wondering if this season will cover what happened in Grand Rapids.
Well, that would be pretty interesting. Where's Grand Rapids? Michigan or something?
Sure.
I feel like after Googling, I just found it. But honestly, that would be great. There's no reason why I shouldn't love it, but there's also no reason why we should have predictions either. Every season's different. Every season does its own thing. And I don't think we've seen a bad season yet. So
No, we absolutely have not.
Exactly. But Zach, I want to thank you for this lovely conversation of Fargo season 1. This was truly a great show. To anybody that hasn't seen it, I hope we've kind of geared your interest toward watching it. If you haven't seen the film, watch it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. They are great movies, shows. Definitely an excellent way to spend your time.
I'd say so. But thank you all for watching, for listening. It depends on what platform you're on. My name's Christopher Kitchen, as always, here with my co-host.
Zach Strackman.
Beautiful. Please follow us at Script or Screen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can listen to the podcast, available on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. Go to www.scriptorscreen.com to find out. Thanks for everything.
I was going to say,
go for it.
If there is anything you want us to talk about, give us suggestions. We're just getting started. We got a long way to go. We want to cover as much stuff as possible. So leave us some comments, some replies. We'd love to see it.
Thanks, and don't forget to share with your friends as well. Bye.